Tallahassee. I think it's very important to come here to St. Augustine, walk the square, and know the history that has happened for the Civil Rights Movement. Without St. Augustine, the Civil Rights Act wouldn't have been passed in 1964. Sorry. And it's very important to sort of walk those steps and understand the history behind what has happened here. So without further ado, I'll welcome Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you so much, Mary. No, it's all good. I got this. I got some skills. I can hold the bullhorn. How's everybody doing? Miss Bernadette, thank you so much for what you do in this area to keep the cultural and the relevant civil rights history of St. Augustine alive and well. We all know that St. Augustine played a very important role in the arc of civil rights history here in the state of Florida. You all know that Dr. King was jailed here as he attempted to eat at a fine dining restaurant here in St. Augustine in 1964. That is obviously also the year that we saw the passage of the historic Civil Rights Act of 1964. We know that if we don't talk about our history, if we don't make sure that we remind each other of where we've been, in fact, in the not so distant past, this year will be the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And to think that, you know, some of us might recall, I'm not included unfortunately, but might recall what it was like in this part of the country during that very volatile time. But the beauty of it all is that on the heels of that history, I get to stand here in St. Augustine in 2018 as the mayor of Florida's capital city and a candidate for governor of the great state of Florida, right? And it's not about me. What this is us continuing the important work of building on legacy and, quite frankly, trying to change what the future looks like for our children and our children's children. We know that you all had your own local battle here as you engaged in a debate around what kind of historic monuments were important in the public square and what kind of monuments are best kept in the halls of history and in libraries and are dealt with in their appropriate context.
Yes.
I wish you all well as you continue to envelop that conversation because it's an important one to be had. I talked about this in my own city of Tallahassee, where out in front of the Capitol, we also have a Confederate monument erected that, in all honesty, doesn't even have complete historical facts on it. But the Daughters of the Confederacy worked hard to get it erected. It still sits in our state capitol. I talked a little bit a while ago about what it meant as a black man to have to drive behind cars with Confederate flags on them and have to be reminded very often of my value and have to interpret what the driver is attempting to communicate to me through those symbols. And they can still be very dangerous and very hurtful for a whole community of people, and that has to matter to us.
Yes.
Whether it affects you directly or whether it affects the people that you love and whose opinions you value. And I want to make sure that with the power that we have and the time that we have here on this planet, that we try to make it different, that my kids and your kids aren't fighting that battle. That they fight a different battle. Their battle ought to be different than the ones that we're fighting today. And so we've got to recommit ourselves. And part of that recommitment is by partaking in activities like this so that we remember and that we don't forget and that we also learn important lessons that we can then teach others. And that more than anything, that we continue to work assiduously and unapologetically to make sure that in our communities and our cities, in one of the most diverse states in all of America, that we don't allow people to be diminished based off the color of their skin, the language that they speak, or their country of orientation, their religion or lack thereof. That's our important work. And so I'm pleased to join you for just a brief while here in St. Augustine. And again, Ms. Bernadette, here you are, the person who's going to lead us through today's activity. We want to thank you again for the important work that you do, and honestly, got to thank y'all for showing up today. May we continue the important work that has to be done until I think that we achieve the fullness of the highest ambitions of this nation, which is one that is equal and available.